On today's episode of Transformation Ground Control, we're going to cover things a little bit differently here today. In the past, we've covered a lot about transformation failures and lessons from failure, mistakes the companies have made. Today, we're going to shift it up a bit. We're going to bring a guest on the show who actually had this idea. He's a CIO. He had an idea for me. He said, Eric, you talk a lot about failure, but why don't you talk enough about successes? What are the things that companies are doing right? And so we will talk about failures, but we'll talk about some of the hiccups along the way, some of the challenges that every organization faces during success. We're going to talk about why this CIO has been able to be successful on multiple occasions in different types of digital transformation initiatives. So we're going to get into a lot of stuff here today, how to be successful, what some of the pitfalls are that you need to overcome on your path to success. We'll cover a lot more stuff as it relates to that here today in episode 281 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you.
3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, the podcast that covers everything related to strategy, people, process, and technology. And as always, it is the tech agnostic definition of what it takes to succeed. We're not here to give you any vendor bias or spin. We're not here to sugarcoat things. We're here to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of digital transformation. So I'm glad to have you here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO at Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent and tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And we work with a lot of different companies throughout the world in our work and our line of work. On this podcast over the last 5.5 years, we've had a lot of different guests, including CIOs, who have shared their success stories, their horror stories, their failure points, all that stuff. And today we're going to dive in with another CIO who's going to talk about success. And this is a little bit different. And it started with a challenge to me. And I'll get to that here in a moment. But first of all, I want to get to a trending topic here today. And this very much ties into what we're going to talk about with our guest here today, Chris, who I'm going to bring on here in just a moment. I'm going to introduce him here today. But the industry is quietly shifting its language on AI and jobs. This is a really interesting article I read recently in the Wall Street Journal. And it's something that's been baffling me for the last 1 to 2 years. And that is, why are all these AI technology leaders leading with how great their technology is going to be at replacing jobs? Even if that's true, which I question whether or not it's true. We're actually going to get into this topic a bit with our guest here later today, too. So we'll come back to this point, and I'll be curious to hear from the audience here what you think. But one thing that's baffled me is why are they leading with job losses? Like, even if that's true, even if we think, okay, some jobs are going to be automated, efficiency is going to go up, productivity is going to go up, all the stuff that we've been talking about for decades as it relates to technology. This is nothing new. I mean, ERP, robotics, even back with the mainframes and the punch cards and all that stuff. I mean, you can go back in time as far back as you want, and there's always been talk about technology in some ways replacing people. You could go back to the Industrial Revolution, back to the electrification of the world, back to factories first being built, back to automobiles. I mean, you think about all these different technologies and how it was going to replace all these jobs, and maybe it disrupted jobs, maybe it shifted jobs around, but it never really replaced technology or replaced people in mass. And, some might say, well, AI is different. It's going to impact us in a way technology never has. That may be true. Although I would argue, the Industrial Revolution, that was a pretty big deal. The invention of electricity and creation of factories, that was a pretty big deal. The creation of the interstate highway systems throughout the world, that was a pretty big deal. So there's been a lot of really big technologies that now you look back and think, well, that's no big deal. But at that time, I imagine it probably was a pretty big deal. I wasn't around when the Industrial Revolution happened, but I have to think it was probably a pretty big deal. I have to think people might have been a little scared about it too at that time, but it's neither here nor there. Point being that even if it is true that AI might replace jobs, why are technology leaders leading with that? I think it's really interesting. I think in this whole AI movement, I think technology executives at software vendors have forgotten that in order for their technology to have any chance of succeeding, they need the people on board, and they've lost their people. They've lost the people, the exact buyers of their technology, the exact potential customers of their technology. They've lost them the minute they're talking about job losses, especially these crazy studies and these assertions that come out that claim that hundreds of millions or billions of jobs are going to be lost due to AI. What employee in their right mind is going to be excited about that? What employee in their right mind is going to get all that information out of their heads, put it into a new system, and help the company on its quest to eliminate your job? It doesn't make any sense, and it's not going to happen. So I think what's happening is we're finally starting to realize that that's not a winning message. And I think executives at the software companies are finally realizing it. So the Wall Street Journal reported this. This would have been just a couple weekends ago. There was an article, I think it was on a Saturday edition. They talked about how AI company leaders are softening the message, moving away from AI replaces jobs to AI augmenting people. And I actually posted a short video on Instagram and YouTube Shorts and TikTok about this. I did a little green screen video, just a quick short video about that article. And one of the comments I got on there that was really interesting, I didn't stop to think about it when I created the video until after I saw this comment. And that was that the person was saying, well, it's probably because they realize that AI is going to be more expensive than the people that they're saying they can replace. So now they themselves are doing it, not because they want people on board, but because they realize, and companies are starting to realize, that AI agents are really expensive and those costs are just going to go up over time, and it's probably going to cost more than humans. Really interesting point. That could be valid. And I actually think that person could be onto something there. So that was an interesting point. But I think, setting that aside for a minute, there's two reasons why I think technology executives are focusing less on job loss and more about how AI is going to help people do their jobs better. And one is what I already mentioned. If you tell the workforce AI is coming for the jobs, they're going to fight the rollout. They're not going to support it. And we've already seen some massive failures with Starbucks and Ford and other big companies that have failed miserably in their initial attempts to roll out AI. And a large part of that was because of human adoption and other basic technology do's and don'ts 101 that were overlooked, which, we have a whole episode where we talk about the Starbucks failure. I have a video on my YouTube channel where I unpack the Starbucks failure in a lot of detail, and part of it is related to people. So that's the first reason. If you tell people that AI is coming for their jobs, they're going to fight the rollout. They're not going to support it. And then the second thing is that the economics of AI don't actually support mass replacement yet. If you turn a person loose with unlimited AI and you can burn 3 times their salary in compute, that's pretty compelling. If you can now say my cost structure largely remains the same, or maybe it's incrementally higher with AI, but I'm getting a ton more value out of each employee or on a per employee basis, that's where I think the real winning message is, and where I think a lot of organizations are going. So the fire everyone to let AI do it, math just doesn't work right now. And so reframing it from replacing people to retooling people is exactly what we're going to talk about here in today's episode. I'd love to hear from you, the audience, too, though. What do you think about this whole AI replacing everyone message? Is that a winning message? Do you think that's actually going to happen? What are your thoughts there? I'd love to hear your thoughts there. But my guest today is Chris Clark. He's a fractional CIO. He's been a CIO at several different organizations over the years. I've actually known him for about 10 years in the industry at multiple companies. I've worked with him, interacted with him. I've learned from him. I think he's learned from me as well. So we have a very mutual respect for one another. And he's actually someone I was talking to a few months ago about something unrelated to this podcast. And he actually challenged me a few months ago. And he said, Eric, why do you talk so much about failure? What if you talked more about what works? And I thought, you know what, you're right. Why don't we do that? And by the way, why don't you be my guest? Why don't you be on the show to talk about that? Because I know he's had his share of lessons learned, battle scars, but he's also had quite a bit of success in his career. So I wanted to have him on the show to do exactly that, to talk about successful ERP and AI initiatives, what separates the projects that work from the ones that don't. And he spent his whole career as a fractional CIO. He hasn't been a CIO his whole career, but he's worked his way up to becoming a fractional CIO. He spent his whole career as a builder. He was a software engineer, turned consultant, turned transformation leader in the mid-market. He's actually an entrepreneur too. I don't know if we'll have time to get to that in today's episode, but he actually started not only a consulting firm, but a technology security, not cybersecurity, but a technology security type of company that he can explain better than I can. But he's an entrepreneur. He's built stuff both internally within organizations. He's built his own teams, his own companies. And so he's a software engineer, turned consultant, turned transformation leader, and he likes the mid-market. I know he's going to talk a bit about why he likes the mid-market. He's also an avid gardener, and believe it or not, the gardening metaphor turns out to be one of the best frameworks for transformation I've heard in a long time. And the only reason I stumbled into this metaphor is because one time I was on a video call with him, not too long ago, just a few months ago. And he was actually in his garden as he was taking this video call with me. I didn't realize what he was doing, understand what he was doing. So I asked him, where are you? I can tell you're outside. I can tell you're cold, because it was really cold that day. And I remember I could see his breath, and he looked like he was huffing and puffing, like he was actually doing some real work. Unlike me, I was sitting in my warm, comfy office. And so I asked, what are you doing, Chris? And he said, well, I'm gardening. And so we got into this whole discussion of how he loves gardening. He's building a garden, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the discussion I want to get into too, is just, how does gardening act as a potential metaphor for transformation? And I really like it. I always use the metaphor of building a house or building a construction project, but this in some ways I like better because gardening has a lot more nuances. And I'd say, I don't want to say there's more art to it, but I think there's a lot of nuances you can't see. There are things below the surface, a lot of unexpected factors with weather and macro types of things that you can't control necessarily. So that's what I'm excited to get into. And before we bring Chris on the show, though, too, one thing I want to mention is that we have our upcoming Digital Stratosphere event. It's an annual conference, tech agnostic. We host it each year. It's a ton of fun. It's a great learning event. You learn from speakers, but people comment all the time about how much they learn from one another, just having other like-minded people in the same room, the networking, the happy hours, the dinners, all that stuff, just getting to know this large tech agnostic ecosystem that we've helped build here at Third Stage. And so that Digital Stratosphere event is a really good one. If you can be there in person, it's ideal, but you can also join it virtually, remotely. It's September 9th through 11th in Denver, Colorado. It's 3 days, no spin, vendor neutral conversations on ERP, AI, digital transformation. I'm also going to be keynoting a presentation there. And I'm also going to sign copies of my new book while there too. The new book is called Welcome to the Machine. I'll give a keynote about the book. I'll sign the book. We have tons of other speakers there as well. So you can go to stratosphere2026.com to register. Just use the promo code earlybird20 for 20% off. Tickets are limited, and be sure to check that out. I hope to see you there. Again, September 9th through 11th, stratosphere2026.com. Hope to see you there. Let's get into it. Here is Chris Clark, who I want to introduce, again, a CIO, someone I've known for a long time now. Chris, thanks for being here today.
First of all, thank you for having me. I want to say I follow you very closely, and everything that you're putting out there in the interworld is just amazing and useful and practical. And keep going. I love it, and I'm proud and happy to be here. I'm going to be brief about me. I started my career as a software engineer in the Valley, worked my way up, built a consulting company, and sold it, as you know, many moons ago. And since then, I've been a one-man band consulting person, and I've taken on CIO roles, CTO roles, and now I would like to say transformation roles, but more business performance optimization is what I would call it. I spend my time running programs for companies in the mid-market, which is, I think, the funnest place to be, because you can have the most impact without a lot of with the right amount of governance, let's say.
Not all the bureaucracy and red tape.
Right, exactly. And you can move quickly, which is great, which is what I like doing, and that's what I'm doing. I'm doing initiatives that apply technology in useful and meaningful ways. Now with AI, it's become incredibly more fun.
Yeah, very cool stuff. And I've known you now for it's been about 10 years now, I think, that you and I have known each other since we first met. Yeah, I know. We both were a lot younger and more naive back then, or at least I was. I'm
still naive, though.
Right. Yeah, I didn't say we've gotten. I wouldn't say we're not naive, but less naive. But I want to actually. It's funny. Right before we went live here, you were talking about how you're excited for the last question I had on my list here. And by the way, I'm going to take audience questions too. So any questions you guys have in the audience, please jump in. In fact, before I get to my first question, which was going to be my last question, I want to say hello to a few people in the audience here joining. Andrew on LinkedIn, joining from Rhode Island, kind of close to where you are there, Chris. And then Charlestown, West Virginia is where Natasha is joining from on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here today. And then far from both of us is Riyadh from Qatar. So thanks for being here today, Riyadh, on LinkedIn. And I'd love to hear where the rest of you are joining. We're streaming to all the major platforms. LinkedIn always seems to be the most active, but if you're joining on YouTube, Facebook, X, or TikTok, please jump in as well. But before we get to sort of the meat of the conversation here today, I want to share a quick story and then get to this question around gardens. So just to give a quick backdrop, a few months ago, you and I had a conversation, and you were outside and you were moving around. I could see you're kind enough to be on camera, even though I could tell it was really awkward for you because you're kind of doing all this stuff. And I was like, Chris, where are you? Like, what are you doing? Because you were very focused, you were very engaged in the conversation, but I could not tell what you were doing. And you said, oh, I'm in my garden. And so then we started to talk about, okay, you're building this garden, and you showed me the whole setup, and I didn't know until that conversation how into gardening you were. But then you started talking about how you compared building your community garden, which is what you're building and you've been working on, I know, recently. But you compared building your community garden to standing up an ERP system. You start with a mess, but then you've got to be patient, and then you can build something really cool from there. What is gardening? As random as it may sound, there is a connection here. What does that metaphor teach leaders, or what could it teach us about transformations?
Yeah. So I'm a proud gardener. I'm part of a community garden. I live near Georgetown in DC, so I live in a condo. So we have these plots, and mine is large. It's 60 by 20. It's a giant hallway. And I started, it took me 8 years. I got on this list. They finally popped me up to the top, and I got my plot. I was so happy. And then I started planning out what I wanted to do with it, and using AI, right, to architect it. Software engineers can't do anything but engineering. So the parallels are, you get started and you begin with the end in mind. And for me, that meant I wanted to maximize every square inch of that space and build something spectacular that I could then bequeath to my kids. And so I started thinking about what I wanted to grow, how I wanted to grow, and how I could use every inch of that space to do it. So the fence, the beds, the path in the garden, where the tools go, all those things, I plotted and planned. And then I started thinking, well, that's the same thing we do in standing up, ERPs or optimizing business process, right? We look at what we want to improve, and then we make a path to get from here to there. And there are a million different things that could stop you from getting to where you want to go. But sometimes the journey is the reward. Once you get that garden up and going and things start growing, you're living in a happy place. And it's the same thing in these projects. You make progress, and you have an impact, and the glass is no longer half empty, right? The glass becomes half full. It's the same thing like if I dropped you into the wilderness in North America, Eric, right? And most people, if you drop them in the middle of the wilderness, let's say you don't drop them on the top of a mountain where they're going to freeze to death, but you drop them someplace where they could actually survive for 3 days without food or water. Most people would die out there if they were 50 miles from civilization. And why? They don't die. They won't die because they don't have to die, right? They die because they're ignorant. They don't know how everything you need to survive is right in front of you. But you may not have the tools or techniques or understandings, like don't eat this mushroom, eat this one, kind of thing, to scavenge and direction yourself on the right path to get out of that place where you are. And ERP is the same way too, right? What people need is they need the tools and techniques and the advice and guidance to get out of the woods and back to the road, right? And on the path.
Right.
So I like to be. My approach is, we talk a lot about how things fail, and things are failing in AI. There's no doubt. I mean, the whole business model is rough. And the push to accelerate is so present. But there are so many things that we got to do first to get the house in order, right? You got to get, like in a garden, you got to set up the soil right. It has to be the right acidity. You got to get rid of the weeds, right? You got to get your data setups. So there's all these things that are prerequisite to success, which get overlooked. And that's why we end up in a place of like, where are we? We're in the woods still. We can't get out.
I want to pause on this gardening metaphor that Chris just gave, because I mentioned it at the beginning of the episode. I want to come back to it here now that Chris mentioned it again. It's one of the best frameworks for transformation I've heard. And transformation is a garden, not a construction project. I know I've talked about transformations as construction projects in the past, but what Chris is saying here is really insightful. And why that distinction matters is because we oftentimes treat our ERP and AI projects like construction, although I will say we often treat our AI and AI projects like construction projects that are flawed. I don't think we even do that well, even if we're using the construction metaphor, but it becomes even more difficult when we talk about gardening. But in construction, you pour the foundation, you put up the walls, you flip the switch, it's done. Either it's built right or it's not. But a transformation doesn't work like that. It's more like a garden. It's not a clean cut. Does it meet our standards? Is it meet the regulatory code? Does it pass an inspection? It's not quite as cut and dry as a construction project, which is why I like the gardening metaphor, perhaps even more than my own construction metaphor that I've been using for years now. So let's unpack it a bit. I mean, first you think about how you prepare the soil. In a garden, that's the acidity, the weeds, the drainage, all the stuff you have to think about. That again, it's not just about planting a seed, throwing some water on it, hoping it grows, and not really knowing, by the way, if it's successful or not until you see the end result, which could take weeks, months, however long. But in a transformation, instead of looking at the acidity, the weeds, the drainage, all that stuff, you're looking at your data, your processes, your governance. And again, this is stuff that's not super cut and dry. If you haven't done it before, you don't necessarily know. Just like in gardening, if you haven't done gardening before, you don't necessarily know what to look for in the soil, what to expect, how patient you need to be, all that good stuff. And if you skip the soil prep in gardening, nothing you plant will grow. And it's a lot like that in digital transformations. If you don't prep, if you don't have the right conditions, if you don't get everything the way it needs to be to the best of your ability and the best of your control, might I add, because in gardening, just like transformations, you can't control everything, but you can put the best conditions possible to give yourself the best chances of success. So that's the first thing, is you prepare the soil. Secondly, you have to be patient with what you can't see. And this is something that's been fascinating me recently, more on a human psychology basis. And that is this whole concept of action bias. I had a psychology type person on my podcast years ago, and she made a comment about how humans have something called action bias. They have a bias towards taking action, even if that action undermines their end goal or runs counter to what they're trying to accomplish, because you can see it, and we have a bias towards action. When you think about it, how many times have you said to someone, don't just stand there, do something? Or, we're behind schedule, we'll work harder, do something. We all have this do something mindset. And with gardening and transformations both, you have to be patient with what you can't see. When you plant a seed, you don't see anything for a while. You can't speed it up. You can't tell it to hurry up. You can't, it's not feasible to think I'm going to take the seed out. It's not doing anything. It's not growing fast enough. So I'm going to take it out and move it and replant it. You do that enough times and you're actually slowing things down. You're taking action. You may feel like you're making progress because you're doing something, but you're actually making things worse. And that's a lot like how people operate in digital transformations. The growth is happening underground, and transformation is the same. A lot of the most important work is invisible. It's the stuff around alignment, change management, trust, adoption. And you're nurturing things you can't necessarily point to on a status report. And it's certainly not going to be on your vendor or system integrator status report. And your vendor or system integrator probably isn't looking at that stuff. They're looking at the seed. They're looking at the plant. They're looking at the stuff you can see and touch and feel. But you, as a leader of a transformation or a project team member, have to think about what it is that the SI or the system integrator and the vendor are not doing. So you have to be patient with what you can't see. And that's the second thing that I really like about this analogy. And then the third thing is that the impediments are constant. Chris said it, the bugs, the mildew, the rabbits, the squirrels. In your project, you might have something similar. You might have political impediments. You might have technical impediments, data impediments, tribal knowledge trapped in people's heads or walking out the door. You don't eliminate them. You just manage them as patiently as they come. And the payoff that Chris really hit on is sometimes the journey is the reward. Once the garden is growing, you're living in a happier place. And once your transformation gets traction, the glass stops being half empty and starts being half full. So I think the key here is to stop treating your transformation like you're building a construction project and start treating it like a garden you cultivate. You prepare the soil, you need to be patient, you manage the pests, and you trust that you can't see is still growing, or you trust that what you can't see is still growing. And by the way, you have to know, here's where experience comes in, and having experienced advisors that aren't just focused on the tangible technology piece of it. This is where having advisors like our team at Third Stage can help so much, in that you have to have a team that knows what the conditions need to be. What does that soil need to look like? What can you expect? What are the risks? How do you navigate the fact that you get some unexpected weather that ruins your garden, whatever the case may be? That's the type of stuff that an experienced gardener can help with when you're building a garden, and an experienced tech agnostic consulting firm can help with when it comes to your digital transformation. So good stuff. I love that analogy that Chris mentions here. And we're going to continue with the conversation here with Chris in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break. I've got a lot more I want to unpack here with him. I know the audience has some questions waiting in the queue here. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. If you're about to embark on the jungle of digital transformation, check out my new book, Welcome to the Jungle. It's a book that just came out in late 2025. It's my second book, and it's a book that focuses on digital transformation failure case studies and talks about the lessons and takeaways from that. It's 300 pages packed of all the lessons and things that I've learned from having been an expert witness in lawsuits related to digital transformations, and also with our team helping clients recover some of their failed projects. I've included as many lessons that I could possibly fit into one book here. You can read this book. You can order it anywhere in the world in hard copy format, which is this format here. You can get it in paperback. You can also get it electronically as well. Scan the QR code right here or go to the links below for your copy. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So, collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 281. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. We help clients with their digital strategies. We help them with software selection, implementation planning. We actually help them with the implementation, the PMO, the change management, managing your system integrator, all the architecture, data migration, testing, all the stuff that can be overwhelming in a digital transformation. That's the stuff we can help with. So be sure to check out our website to learn more about us. You can go to thirdstage-consulting.com to learn more about us. And I'm here with Chris Clark. He's a fractional CIO. We're talking about ERP successes and what it takes to succeed in digital transformations. One thing I've always struggled with, or I've watched leaders struggle with, is, you talk about being patient with gardening, and you have to be patient with transformations, but I mean, you have to be aggressive. You have to hold people accountable. You have to have timelines and all that. So don't get me wrong, but there's also a certain amount of patience with the stuff you can't see. And it seems like that would be a big deal with gardening too. Like, you plant a seed, you're not going to see immediate results, but the seed's there, you're nurturing it, you're watering it, you're doing, and I'm not a gardener, so I'm probably oversimplifying the whole process.
No. And then come bugs and mildew and
Yeah.
and bunnies and squirrels and all kinds of things that, that they're gonna, they're impediments, right? It's the same thing on a project, right? You have political impediments, you have technical impediments, you have all these, data impediments, you have process, retain, tribal knowledge things. You have OCM things. There's so many things that could knock you off the path to success.
Yeah, and it's
But
not it's
but
not
that
stuff you
journey
can
is
immediately see and touch too.
that's right. You're going to bear fruit at some point, right? And you have to just deal and duck with those things as best you can, and define what success means early. And sometimes on a project you need to redefine what success means. Like if you're coming into a project, you were talking about this the other day on one of your meeting casts, where what do you do? If you enter a failure midstream or early stream or late stream, what do you do? In those cases, I think you check as many positive boxes as you can, right?
Yeah.
And say, okay, we're not going to get. Let's be real. We may not get to this in this method that we've been doing. We have to go do something different, and that's just common sense. So you redefine success, and in an agile way on these projects, that's kind of happening all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because you only have a certain amount of time and money and resource, right? And once you start using it and not getting what you want, you got to, you got all these dials. You got to start turning them, and that's art, not science. But AI helps a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I want to turn to the audience too here. A lot of people joining from throughout the world. We've got Dr. Robinson joining from London, UK on LinkedIn. Thanks for being here again, Dr. Robinson. Got a couple people, I can't see the names on LinkedIn, one from Paris, one of my favorite countries to visit. Hello, bonjour. Poland is also here on LinkedIn. Someone joining, Mohammed joining from Jakarta on LinkedIn. Osgar from Turkey. Malik from Malaysia. And Lean from Holland. So you've got a global audience here. It's very interesting.
Wow.
You've got to say here, Chris. So thanks
Impressive.
Thanks for being, yeah, lots of people joining from all over the place. No pressure, by the way.
No pressure.
But so I want to get to your success stories, but it's not just a success story. It's, obviously there's bumps along the way, but you walked into an organization not too long ago that had tried an ERP implementation twice before it had failed. But then you and the CFO saw that previous attempts missed, and you guys did some things different. Tell us that whole story. Like, tell us how you took a troubled project, or a same organization had trouble implementing, and then you came and did things a little bit differently with a new CFO as well. Tell us about that. How did this all?
Mid-market organization, right? $1 billion company. Had a very small IT team, and the effort was being pushed by the IT team, and it never really got traction. And I mean, and there's so many reasons for that. It didn't get the sponsorship that it needed, and probably because the value proposition didn't resonate at all with the executive team. Why should we do things differently? This is working. We don't need to spend more money, kind of thing. So we took what at Burn, it's Burn Dairy where I'm working. We took this crawl, walk, run approach, which is, let's do something small and prove out the value proposition first. Let's talk to all of the stakeholders. And back then, 3 or 4 years ago, we did analysis differently. We didn't have all these tools where we could record everything everyone said and then put it in a compendium. We had to go to the recordings, get the transcripts, read them all ourselves, and then pull out themes, right? And we had tools to do that. And then think about impacts. What are the things we were actually trying to achieve? And back then, we had it was really more tactical than it was strategic. It was all these business systems had built up over time. None of them were talking to each other. There were stovepipes everywhere. There were people hoarding the knowledge. Like, this guy has this data pond over here, and he's the only one who knows what's actually going on. And then everyone's sending everyone else an email, right, with their report, which which was somewhat, managed chaos. So the idea of sticking everything in a central place and everyone having the same source of truth, and honestly, that was what ERP was a few years ago. Um, Made a lot of sense to a lot of people. So we built the value proposition, then we got the backing of the team, but we made them the decision makers, right? We involved them from the start and said, we were asking, what do you need? What do you want? How is this important to you? So let's try to get out of this what's needed. And then we voluntold them to participate.
Right.
And they did, because the culture of the organization was such that we're in this together. And that's what you need. When you have that kind of culture, it sort of makes it easy.
Right. Well, and one thing I've noticed about seeing you work in a couple different organizations over the years is that compared to most CIOs that I work with, you have an uncanny ability to guide and facilitate, but not interject your own preferences and your own biases too much. And what I mean by that is a lot of times CIOs come in with like, they're zealots for, a certain product or a certain type of product or even a certain implementation style or a certain way of addressing the business needs. And you really good at saying, well, you could do that. And almost like a more consultative approach where, I've seen you give recommendations and say what you think, but ultimately you back off and let the business decide and let the business deal with the consequences. And that ownership, I think, is really important for better or for worse. I mean, I'm sure there's times where it's driven you mad, where you think, okay, if you would just do
right.
differently.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right?
Yeah.
I think that has to do with the fact that I've been a consultant my whole life. And I think also one thing I try to do is put myself in the position of the COO or the CFO or the CEO and try to think like that person and then convince myself, right, first and foremost, I'm one of these data point guys. I like to have a million dimensions on a decision, right? So, right. And I'm not afraid to run down those rat holes, but also convince myself, what a good decision is. And, the right decision is sort of a function of a good decision times the adoption possibility of that decision, right? So, and honestly, there are so many ways you can get things done, and not being attached to any one specific tool, technology, method is just, it's a refreshing way to think about things. And I was, for example, 2 ERPs ago, we stood up SAP in a similar CPG environment. And so when we got to this one, we both thought, well, this is probably, a slam dunk for this platform, SAP. But throughout the process, we learned that our options were actually equivalent or better with other platforms. So that open-mindedness led us to a different set of decisions. And I facilitated it mainly. I didn't have a say in I didn't have a vote in that sense. I wasn't trying to influence. I was just trying to assist in making a good decision. And I could have lived with any of them, to be honest. Because the devil's in the details, right?
Right.
A platform that can get you to where you want to go. There's many options, and for small and for mid-sized companies, it's even larger. Like I know one mid-sized company doing a giant Odoo implementation, and when I saw what they were doing, I thought, wow, I'd love to be part of this, just because Odoo sounds amazing. Like I would like to do an Odoo thing, but that's the engineer in me talking, right?
Right.
Because I haven't done it. If you haven't done it, all of a sudden, like it becomes way more sexy than the thing that you've been doing.
Right. So along those lines, though, here's a really good question from Megan on LinkedIn. perfect timing on this question. What's the worst decision you've watched a business play out despite your recommendation? So, like, I'm sure there's cases where, yeah, you could live with either option, but I imagine there's got to be at least an example or two you've got in your career where it's like, you could do that, but that's a terrible idea. But I'm doing this for you. And
so I'll give you one where I put up a terrible idea, and it got slapped down. And in retrospect, it was good that it got slapped down. So when we began this Oracle integration, we were doing Oracle and WMS, and WMS is a completely independent system. Oracle's WMS of Oracle, and my recommendation was that we do them in parallel work streams in an agile way. And I didn't want to waterfall to WMS, right? Where we do the ERP first and then we tack on the warehouse. I thought, no, that can't work. We're going to learn so many things throughout the process. We're going to have to be doing them both at the same time. But candidly, there was no way the organization was going to be able to absorb that amount of change,
right,
in the time frame that we had. So we had to pivot. So that was a bad decision that got reworked. Well, it wasn't a bad decision. It was a bad recommendation that got reworked by smarter approaches, let's just say. But there are also times when you think, wow, this way we're going about things is not optimal or not the best way, but the culture of the organization demands it.
Yeah.
And you live with it because it would cause too much either political or economic disruption.
Right.
And that's one of the things about being glass half full and glass half empty. Mark Twain said something about patience. He said, patience is the ability to disguise your impatience. Right.
Right.
And,
I love that.
I've had to learn that many, many times as a CIO or as anyone in this industry. You sit and listen and nod your head and go, okay. And then, you want these things to come out of your mouth that don't. They're in your head. You got to leave them there, right? Until the right moment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to say hello to Josie on LinkedIn, joining from Montreal. Masa joining on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for being here. I had no idea. I knew we'd cover a lot of ground in a short period, Chris, but I wasn't expecting to get into Mark Twain. We've gone gardening, we've gone Mark Twain. Here's another question I have for you. I don't recall which, because I've worked with you in multiple companies, I don't recall which one this is, but in one case you consolidated 11 bespoke systems. Many of them were data ponds where people shuffled information into Excel and back to Access. What did that cleanup actually take? And I think that's a common challenge that a lot of people listening probably have right now in their organizations. They've got these legacy spreadsheets and databases and homegrown systems and all this stuff. Tell us about that cleanup. I mean, what did that look like in that case where you had those 11 different systems?
Yeah. So when you put out an RFP, one of the first things the integrator asks is, how clean is your data? And
and then you laugh.
Right, and then you go, okay.
What do you mean by clean?
Well, I'm like, can you give me a metric for that? Is there some standard measurement for cleanliness? I don't know. But in this case, like I said, we couldn't even call these lakes, right? Because they're just so. When people are left to on their own to get information in and out of the system, they're going to use the tools that they know. Okay.
Right.
So, in this case, it's Access Database and ODBC, right? And then, some report writer that they were using to get the data and metadata into their database. And there were like a whole bunch of these all over the place. So you got to earn the clean data there. So, each one needs to be separately analyzed for what business process is involved in it, what reports are being generated from it, and then what's the best. Now that we're moving to an ERP, and any ERP has, of course, multiple ways of reporting out data, multiple ways of building a process. So all of that gets put into a process inventory. I haven't done an ERP project without a process inventory or a KPI improvement metric, and then all of the work streams get mapped to both the process inventory, a metric for improvement in the process and a metric for a movement in a KPI or a business outcome.
Let me highlight what Chris just said because it's the most important reframe in this entire episode. And that is, you don't have an ERP project. You don't have an AI project. You have a business improvement project. And I think we lose sight of that with technology bells and whistles and enhancements in technology, AI tools that we're still trying to figure out, cloud solutions that have new capabilities, new features, new limitations that we're trying to figure out. So it gets super easy to really hone in on the technology. And then you add to the fact that your vendors, your system integrators are all biased in the way of, technology first types of mindsets. And it can be really easy to forget about the outcomes, the business improvements that Chris is talking about here. And it sounds obvious on the surface, but it isn't, because a vast majority of organizations run these initiatives as technology projects for years now, decades now. It's been the same refrain where vendor convinces client that technology is awesome. System integrator comes in, reinforces the fact that technology is awesome and that they can implement said technology awesomely. And along the way, we all forget about business improvement and real outcomes. We become myopically obsessed with the technology. How do we get the technology to work? And how can we make sure that the go live happens in a way we want it to? And the goal becomes implement the software or deploy the AI, whereas success gets defined as go live or the system works. And I use the word works in quotes because it can work technically, but be a complete train wreck of a disaster operationally. And we've seen that so many times. And by the way, some of the world's most massive failures and lawsuits that have ended up in litigation had technology that actually worked pretty well. In fact, a lot of times lawyers are spending tons of time and money just fighting over whether the technology works. And then we come in as expert witnesses and say, surprise, the technology worked. It worked fine. But guess what? It's all the other stuff that didn't work. It's the change management, all the, the process improvements, the alignment as a team, the getting the system to do what you really needed it to do, not just to get it to work and pass a technology test, but more, can you function as a business? Can you preserve your secret sauce? Can you service your customers better? Can you build a better product? All that stuff is what gets lost. So getting the system to work is the wrong goal. Nobody's business got better because they went live with the new system. They got better because they improved their processes. They brought their costs down. The quality went up. Customers got served faster. And by the way, just because you implement a new technology, even if it's an ideal fit for you, doesn't mean that stuff's going to happen automatically. Doesn't mean that software alone is going to do it. It's the other stuff. And Chris does something that most people skip. He builds a process inventory and a KPI improvement metric for every project. So every work stream maps to two things: a measurable improvement in the process and a measurable improvement in a business outcome. And if a work stream can't be tied to either, then you have to ask yourselves, why are you doing it? And that's a big, important point of not just getting more business value out of your project longer term, but also just from a pure project management, project governance perspective. That is a great decision tool to be able to say, does this customization request, does this potential enhancement, does this potential third-party bolt-on, does this extra round of data migration, this extra round of user acceptance testing, does it allow us to increase business value? If yes, then let's consider. If no, why are we even talking about it? And that is such a basic thing that so many companies lose sight of. And again, it's because they get so myopically focused on we've got to deploy all these different modules because we are deploying an all-in-one ERP solution and our vendor and system integrator is telling us we need these modules. And no one ever stops to think a lot of times why that is. What is it we're trying to accomplish? So one of the ways around this is before you start, write down the business outcomes you're trying to move. During a project, measure against them relentlessly and consistently. And when you're evaluating a system integrator, ask for the receipts. Show me where you moved a real business metric, not just where you stood up vanilla software. And technology that doesn't turn into a business outcome is just expensive technology. So you want to make it a business improvement project. It gets easier to sell, easier to fund, and easier to finish as well.
I'll say the one thing that I think differentiates, somebody who's done a lot of these projects from somebody who hasn't is that sort of mindset that we're here to implement tech, but more importantly, we're here to make an improvement in the business somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of integrators that self-govern, Eric, like you guys do. On that, are they measuring those things? Are they asking the customer, how are we doing? like
Right.
Ed Koch, how am I doing? Um, I don't see enough of that governance. And if you're going to hire a systems integrator today, you can ask for these receipts now because we have AI, right?
Right.
You can say, hey, show me your AI compendium. Show me where you have built something that had a meaningful impact to the business. Show me a customer that will vouch for your ability to not just stand up a tech in its basic vanilla form, but be uh, be sensitive to how that's affecting the business. You can
Right.
ask for that now.
Right.
You can ask for those receipts, and I would recommend you do.
Well, and also, you mentioned, you bring up a good point that I want to bring back to gardening, because after all, it does all come back to gardening, right?
It does.
And Mark Twain. But in all seriousness, though, back to gardening and Mark Twain, you mentioned that you're not sure why system integrators have so much trouble governing themselves, and I think a lot of it is because the nuances of what makes a transformation project successful, usually, I hate to say it, is usually not the stuff the system integrator does. I mean, they are a key part of it. They are very important, don't get me wrong, but that's the stuff that's a little more obvious to see and touch. And the finesse, the true gardening style approach, and the patience that's required is to nurture the things that you can't see and touch. And that's usually outside the scope of what the system integrator is doing. It's usually the process improvement, it's the change management, it's the internal politics, like you mentioned before. It's all that stuff that isn't a deliverable that shows up on a statement of work or in a contract sign off or whatever, but it's the stuff that absolutely will make or break a project. Have you seen that as well?
I have, and we build these contracts now to incentivize around reaching the KPI, so that there's show me the money kind of approach.
Yeah.
So if we get to the KPI, and and we agree on what the metrics are, we have to, you know, but it's part of the SOW. It's part of the legal contract. If we get to it, the integrator's in the boat rowing with an oar next to us, and you have to think of it that way. They get healthier. They get an incentive, and if they don't make it, there's a penalty for that. And I think that's the way to construct these things so that everybody's on the same page, marching to the same drumbeat, right?
Yeah.
And we don't see that enough. I think in the mid market, it's easier to do. If you're doing some giant, $bazillion project, I suppose it's harder. But
Right.
but there's this term Palantir put out there called forward deployed engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I love that term for some reason because I looked at it and I said, wow, I fit into that box. I'm a forward deployed engineer. But I think what's happening rapidly, and AI has caused this, is all these engineers that build these interfaces or these integrations for ERP, they've had to become, we call them functionals, right? Or techno-functional. They've had to become business problem solvers. They can't just be the guy that knows the software and can stand it up.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be the guy now or the gal that is having a measurable impact on the business, right?
Right.
So what does that mean? They're becoming business problem solvers because you can actually deploy the code now simply and easily with AI, right? In almost any ERP, sandbox. So what are you really doing now? You have to be someone who has a great head for business and a great head for the application. And again, this is a shift, right? This is a big shift. And we talk about when we talk about AI. I'm going to say one more thing, and I'll stop talking. What some of the industry is saying and seeing is, oh, we're going to fire all these engineers because we can do all this engineering. But no, the cost of AI precludes that. But what's happening is the engineer is taking on many, many roles. They're becoming, someone who deploys, someone who does business analysis, someone who writes code. But when I say write code, they're really vibe coding. So that they're wearing many hats. So what's happening is the roles are shifting, right? It's not just I'm now a software engineer and I'm digging a hole with a shovel, and you've given me a plow, right, to dig the hole bigger and faster. It's not that. It's like I'm also digging the hole, but I'm standing up the base of the house and the scaffolding, and I'm designing the bathroom. I'm doing all these things. I'm doing the plumbing, the electricity, and I think people that have learned how to use AI are becoming invaluable to that process, right? And that's why you're seeing all of these frontier LLMs putting hundreds of millions of dollars into deploying consultants, right? Because they know that the plumbing inside a company is going to require that level of skill, someone that can, play second base, third base, first base, pitch, catch, play the outfield, the whole 9 yards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'd love to hear from the audience too. What are some of those not hidden nuances, but those nuances that are harder to see and touch, similar to gardening? What are those areas of patience that you've seen required? The intangibles, the things that you think are critical to success based on your experience. I'd love to hear your feedback here in the audience. I'm here with Chris Clark. We're talking about ERP success, AI success, a lot of different stuff related to digital transformation. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola. C-O-L-A.
If you only attend one event this year, make it Digital Stratosphere 2026. It's our annual flagship conference. It's going to be September 9th through 11th in Denver, Colorado, the same location as we held it last year. It's 3 days where digital leaders, ERP practitioners, and transformation experts come together for no-spin, vendor-neutral conversations on ERP, AI, and digital transformation. There's no marketing fluff. There's no pay-to-play sponsorships, just real practitioners sharing real lessons. Go to thirdstage-consulting.com/stratosphere to learn more and register. Tickets are limited, and these always sell out, and I'd love to see you there. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 281. My name is Eric Kimberling, CEO of Third Stage Consulting. This is a tech-agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. Excited to have you here today. And we're here chatting with Chris Clark, a fractional CIO, very experienced CIO. We're talking about ERP and AI success and what it takes to succeed in your digital transformation initiatives. Here's just a quick follow-up comment here on LinkedIn. Great point. Understand the requirements and needs before you jump in. Again, it's back to that patience comment. It's easy just to say, let's just start building stuff, especially when you're a technologist like yourself, or you're a builder like yourself. I can see how you would have, or others like you might have, a bias deep down of wanting to just start building stuff versus let's plan this out. Let's make sure we've got the right tools in the garden. Let's make sure we've got the right conditions. Let's make sure we have everything we need. Let's have a plan. Then we can start building and based on that.
I'll add one thing to that. I'm a builder. I love this agile process, right? Because we're gonna incrementally improve. And is my inclination to build? Yeah, it is. It's to dive in and build. But I think in doing so, you have to anticipate that it's not going to be right. You're going to fail, right? But the important thing is what planning does. They say you don't plan to fail, you fail to plan. What the planning does is it lets you fail well, Eric. Right. Like you talk a lot about failure, and I think, there's failure, but then there's also good failure, right? There's okay, that didn't work. Let's move on. Let's refine the approach.
Like a manageable failure. It's not like a massive failure.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to say, I don't know the answer to that. Let me go down that rat hole a little bit and see where it goes. And, is that going to work? I don't know. I can't tell you how many times I say, I don't know in a meeting. I say it all day long. I don't know the answer to that. But, then you start thinking about it and dimensioning it and then going, okay, well, let's run a couple of experiments and see where this goes.
Well, I think that's a really good point. Interesting point, because I think it's not and I know I'm probably guilty of this more than anyone. It's not a black or white, either you fail or you don't sort of thing, right? It's more about how you fail, like you said, but also, first of all, I think first and foremost, you have to recognize that you don't know. And, a lot of times people have this false sense of confidence, like, oh, well, our integrator is saying that it's fine. So whatever, we'll just double down on this approach. Whereas if you say, well, hold on, we're not sure, there's some risk here because I don't know, right? So we're going to try it, but we're going to put some parameters around it to where if we do fail, we pull out, right? We're not just going to we're not going to bet the whole project on this one unknown assumption.
I would say some organizations need to fail before they succeed too. Like they need to fall flat and go, that didn't work. Like this design was aspirational, but it didn't get us to, like all these guys that built these chatbots, for sales really early in the process last year. They really thought that they could put a chatbot up and do customer service that way. Right. And they learned the hard way that customers ran in the other direction because they didn't get the answers that they wanted. They got some weird AI, effect because it wasn't completely vetted, right? It was just like, oh, let's throw this out there and we'll spend less money, right? And we'll have some robot talking to our customers. And if I was a VP of marketing, I'd be going, oh my God, let's not do that. But you know what? Right. It might have been good in a like, let's test this out kind of thing with a set of customers over here, that we trust and love and who will forgive us if it's terrible, right? It might have been a better approach than to just unleash it into the wild.
Yeah, well, and I think what you're getting at too is, there's a lot of thought that goes into everything you're saying. It requires a certain amount of, you have to listen, right? You have to listen to your outside advisors, but you also have to go with your instincts, and you also have to take ownership to know that, all right, there's times I'm going to listen to my outside advisors. And the reason I bring this up is because I think a lot of times vendors and SIs are guilty of oversimplifying or downplaying the risk that you're talking about. If you know you're going to fail, that's why when we're talking to clients or even in these podcasts, we talk so much about failure. It's like, you got to open your eyes and see the risk. You have to know they're there. I'm not saying don't go do it because of the risk, but know the risks are there and know that you might step into a landmine here and there and know what you're going to do about it, when you do step into it. But I think too many people are like, well, the SIs tell me everything's fine. That it's, best practice and proven methodology. So it's, how hard can it be, right? And the point here is that it's not easy. I mean, every company has.
What a huge risk on projects is right now is you have superstars on an ERP project or an AI project, people who really get it and really can use the tool, and what they begin to realize is their personal value proposition has gone to there, right? So in the middle of a project, you're going, God, this guy is so hyper performing, right? We can't lose that guy, right? Because he's now in the critical path of the critical, because he's worn all the hats, he's done other things, and it's a giant risk. And sometimes it goes unnoticed, right? That there are these people. We're on an 18 or 24 month march in month 8, and bam, they're gone,
right?
And you're like, oh God, what's that going to do to my project? Now I have to like totally recalculate what's happening here. And that's a huge risk right now because these folks are in high demand and low supply, is what I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, I agree. And actually related to that, there's a couple comments on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if it's the same person saying this or not, but one comment is, developers that are able to connect the pain with the path to implementation will be worth 4 times their cost easily. I tend to agree with that. People, they can think outside the box of just developing stuff, but what is it I'm trying to accomplish by developing stuff, and what problem am I trying to solve? That's way more valuable than the best developer in the world without that context. And then a follow-up here is building has always been the path building, and integration versus building exactly what you want or need. The latter is getting easier, cheaper, and faster every day. The real struggle is knowing how to build internally. Most don't know how to do that well.
That's true. And it's not their core competency, right? So, everyone's going to hire consultants, especially when they don't have the core competency built in. But trust and credibility in the consulting realm it is hard to come by, I would say. Your consultant needs to be credible and they need to be trustworthy. The more important than I would say almost anything else. And but the good news is now we can vet people. We can vet these teams of people much better than the way we used to. Uh, you know, I mean, 5 years ago, Eric, I was interviewing everyone the integrator proposed, right? Literally interviewing every single person. And and then we would build in things into the contract, like the contract has to have these people on it. You can't just say these are the people coming and then
swap
they're
them
not the
out.
ones that you're going to get. And that means even the offshore teams, right? So now it's easier to do that, right? Because there's so much information out there on on these projects. And one thing I'll highly recommend to everybody is, if you're going to do a thing with an integrator, it doesn't matter what it is, go talk to a customer that's done something similar. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but it has to be something similar. And have that interview without the integrator in the room. Super important checkbox, because hopefully you'll get a piece of the truth, and then you add up all those truths to your own truth,
Right.
which is really important. You want someone who values you as a customer too. In other words, you're in their 80-20. Like your project, say it's only $1 million. Well, they're doing $10 million projects, right? So you're as important as their other key critical clients. You don't want to be the one where you're just over here and you're not important. It's important, and in that sense, it's okay to hire someone with a 40-person company, right, or a 20-person company, if they're going to pay attention to you. If you're the most important thing, then that's fine.
Yeah, a lot of times it gets easy to be enamored by that big, the cachet of the big name. But the problem with big name is they've got a lot of clients are way more important.
You're not as important to them.
Yeah. How about I want to get to a couple other things here, case studies in your career, or case study highlights, I should say. One is an Oracle Fusion Cloud ERP implementation that you did. It was a 3.5-year project. You had a 1-month delay, which is actually really good for a 3.5-year project to only have a 1-month delay. You won an award for that implementation. Tell us about this project and why you think ultimately that project was a success, now that you have the benefit of hindsight. What was it that made that project successful?
I think what made that project successful was our proactive nature to getting things done, and being realists. Giving ourselves a break when we needed it. We had it was a typical project. We had design, development, waterfall, SIT, UAT, go live, day in the life, all of these things. Change champions, paying attention to OCM, everything that you would need to have on a project. The other thing we did is we used EVM to measure, our performance versus our budget. Yes, earned value management. And earned value management is great because it'll tell you when your project is blipping financially, when it's blipping from a schedule perspective. But we were very, very, we paid very close attention to these details. When it came time to go live, we were honest. Are we ready? And when I say we had a blip of a month, it was because we decided we weren't ready. And
so you deliberately decided. So this didn't just happen to you. You decided.
Yes, it costs more money.
Right.
Yeah. You got to keep going. So what we decided to do is say, well, we know we have issues and problems here. We're not ready here. We have, a performance period in the company coming up where we don't want people distracted because it's the highest selling part of the season. So what are we going to do? These modules are ready, but the people aren't, right? So we did what we call a stage go live, and we started. So the project sort of went from waterfall to agile. We call that Wagile,
right? Yeah,
whatever you call it. Where we're going, okay, now we're going to sort of incrementally release things. And I think that saved the budget. It saved the project. But it's just being, I think, realistic, right? And not being afraid to say, I don't think these folks are ready, and getting the evidence. And a lot of times the evidence is OCM. Like, for example, if you have a set of test cases for end-to-end testing, and you have 5 people in the plant who never ever participated in the end-to-end testing, and a change champion who missed the last 4 meetings, and then you went and ran all those tests with other groups of people so you could actually get the project done, but the people who were supposed to be doing the tests didn't do them, or you had turnover in shifts in the plant and you couldn't get it done, or there's some reason. You have to just be honest that you're going to go live with something that 5 people haven't actually seen the handheld scanner, haven't done it, haven't worked with it, don't know how it works.
Right.
That could be a production problem.
Yeah.
And when you're in a 24/7, 365 operation, that you can't do that.
Right.
There's no way you're stopping product from going out the door.
Right.
Because you're so you got to shift and pivot. And I think being honest, some people get embedded in the success of something, and it becomes part of them, like they own it, and that's good. But then they push it to the point where it's going to break if you don't slow down or take an inventory. And
yes.
A lot of times that doesn't happen, and then what ends up happening is things begin to compound. The complexity begins to get worse because we're not just accepting the reality, right?
Yeah.
And
that's a great point. I mean, I think the project managers in all of us would say, don't delay that project a month. But the really good project managers, the ones that are good, can say, well, we might have to delay this a month, and that kind of sucks. But what would suck even worse is if our guys out on the shop floor couldn't use the scanners, or couldn't complete transactions, couldn't ship product. That would be really catastrophic. So let's not do that.
That's a much higher risk. So you go. So the proactive, glass half full approach is, what can we do? What can we get done in this time frame?
Yeah.
And then let's push the things that are higher risk out a little bit further. And I think a lot of people end up going in that manner, but don't recognize it. In other words, sometimes the RAG chart is subjective, not evidence-based, right? So someone will say, this is green, and it's not really green. And so you need a formula for that, and that's what, so that's one of the things we did on the project. We said, we're not going to just put a subjective RAG. We have an actual formula in spreadsheet that determines the RAG. So it's evidence-based.
Right.
And, you can agree with it or not, but it's data-based. It's backed by the data. You can say, okay, it's amber. I love amber, by the way, because it's so obtuse. Like our CFO would go, listen to me. I don't do amber. I do red and green.
Right. Red, yellow, green. How hard can it
be? Right. There's no amber. So amber is red. I'm like, okay, but it's light red. It's not really like a full dark red.
Right.
It's sort of,
so it's yellow. That's what I would say.
Right.
It's yellow, right? No.
Right.
So I'm going to pull out somewhat of a practical checklist that Chris just gave unknowingly. I don't think he realized he was giving us a ready-to-use checklist, but he just did. And it's the gold if you're about to hire a system integrator. There's really 4 things in this checklist. One is to get the receipts, the proof that this person or that this firm can handle the job. And in the AI era, you should ask an integrator to prove impact, not show me you can build software, but show me where you moved a real business metric, especially if you're talking about AI or some new ERP tool. It doesn't matter what it can do, what it looks like on a computer in a demo environment. Show me how a customer that I can talk to directly, by the way, show me and tell me how they use that technology to improve their business outcome. Not that they just went live with the software. Secondly is to interview the actual people. He talked about how he would interview every team member on a project, and some system integrators probably cringed when they heard that, I imagine. I know I would if I was a system integrator. I might cringe a little thinking, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. And it probably is for the system integrator, but it works for him. And there's some merit to that because he cuts through the noise of the polished sales team that wins the deal. And then there's a disconnect with the consultants, the actual consultants that do the work, including that offshore team, by the way. You're going to have a lot of offshore people, a lot of junior level resources that probably weren't part of winning the deal for you, but they end up becoming the ones that do most of the work. So you want to build it into the contract. You want the named people as the ones you get in the project, and you don't want to bait and switch. And one of the ways to work around that is to make sure you have it called out in the contract that you have the right to approve and or remove anyone from the project that the SI provides to you. So that's the second thing. The third thing is talk to a reference customer without the system integrator in the room. I've been in a lot of these reference calls where the system integrator is in the room and they're sort of coaching the client on what to say and how to answer it. They'll jump in with their own commentary to smooth over anything that is less than perfect. And you do want the good, the bad, the ugly. Even if you know you're going to hire the system integrator, it's good to know like what were the challenges working with that SI, and you can learn from that. You can figure out how to manage that SI better going forward. So you don't want that sanitized version. You want the real one. So talk to the reference customers, unfiltered. And then fourth, make sure you matter to the system integrator. This is where a lot of companies get caught up, especially with the big four, the big global system integrators. If you're doing a $1 million project, it's going to be a lot of money to you, but to one of the big four, $1 million project is nothing. You're not going to get the top talent on a $1 million project if you're hiring Deloitte, Accenture, Capgemini, KPMG, PwC, any of those guys. You might be important still. I'm not saying they're going to totally neglect you, but you might be scratching the bottom of the barrel of their talent pool. And you certainly aren't going to be the PepsiCo or the Alibaba or the Amazon or whoever their biggest client might be. Those are the ones that are probably getting the A resources. So you want to make sure that you have a firm that's big enough to provide the capabilities you need, but they're not so big that you're not important to them. And that's where a mid-size company can be very beneficial, or maybe even a boutique sort of organization. So you want to make sure you're not getting the B team. And like Chris said, sometimes a 20 or 40 person firm that treats you as the most important client can beat the big name consultancies that treat you as an afterthought. So you don't want to get seduced by the logo. We've seen plenty of failures amongst the big four, the big consultancies, the big brand names that everyone trusts and recognizes. To be fair, we've also seen failures at other firms too, but I don't think there's a direct correlation. There's certainly not a positive correlation between big name equals more likelihood of success. I would say absolutely not. There's no correlation I've ever seen. I have also not seen a negative correlation, but if I had to speculate, which this is purely speculative, it's a hypothesis not proven by any data or science, but just based on qualitative experience, I would say there's probably, if there is any correlation, it's probably a negative correlation simply because those companies are so big and they have such a conflict of interest that you're more likely to see failure with those big firms than you are a smaller one. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
It's easier to do that, right? Because there's so much information out there on these projects. And one thing, I'll highly recommend to everybody is if you're going to do a thing with an integrator, it doesn't matter what it is, go talk to a customer that's done something similar. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but it has to be something similar. And, have that interview without the integrator in the room. Super important checkbox. Because, hopefully you'll get a piece of the truth, and then you add up all those truths, to your own truth,
right?
Which is really important. You want someone who values you as a customer too. In other words, you're in there 80-20. Like your project, say it's only $1 million. Well, they're doing $10 million projects, right? So you're as important as their other key critical clients. You don't want to be the one where, you're just over here and you're not important. It's important. And in that sense, it's okay to hire someone with a 40-person company, right? Or a 20-person company. If they're going to pay attention to you, if you're the most important thing, then that's fine.
Yeah, a lot of times it gets easy to be enamored by that big, the cachet of the big name. But the problem with big name is they've got a lot of clients are way more important.
You're not as important to them.
Yeah. How about, I want to get to a couple other things here, case studies in your career, or case study highlights, I should say. One is an Oracle Fusion Cloud ERP implementation that you did. It was a 3.5-year project. You had a 1-month delay, which is actually really good for a 3.5-year project to only have a 1-month delay. You won an award for that implementation. Tell us about this project and why you think ultimately that project was a success now that you have the benefit of hindsight. What was it that made that project successful?
I think what made that project successful was our proactive nature to getting things done and being realists, giving ourselves a break when we needed it. We had, it's a typical project, we had design, development, waterfall, SIT, UAT, go live, day in the life, all of these things, change champions, paying attention to OCM, everything that you would need to have on a project. The other thing we did is we used EVM to measure, our performance versus our budget. Yes, earned value management. And earned value management is great because it'll tell you when your project is blipping financially, when it's blipping from a schedule perspective. But we were very, very, we paid very close attention to these details. When it came time to go live, we were honest. Are we ready? And when I say we had a blip of a month, it was because we decided we weren't ready. And I think
you deliberately decided. So this didn't just happen to you. You decided.
It costs more money.
Right.
Yeah. You got to keep going. So what we decided to do is say, well, we know we have issues and problems here. We're not ready here. We have, a performance period in the company coming up where we don't want people distracted because it's the highest selling part of the season. So what are we going to do? These modules are ready, but the people aren't, right? So we did what we call a stage go live, and we started. So the project sort of went from waterfall to agile. We call that WAGILE,
right? Yeah,
or whatever you call it. Where we're going, okay, now we're going to sort of incrementally, release things, and I think that saved the budget. It saved the project. But it's just being, I think, realistic, right? And not being afraid to say, I don't think these folks are ready, and getting the evidence. And a lot of times the evidence is OCM. Like, for example, if you have a set of test cases for end-to-end testing, and you have 5 people in the plant who never, ever participated in the end-to-end testing, and a change champion who missed the last 4 meetings. And then you went and ran all those tests with other groups of people so you could actually get the project done. But the people who were supposed to be doing the tests didn't do them. Or you had turnover in shifts in the plant and you couldn't get it done. Or there's some reason. You have to just be honest that, you're going to go live with something that 5 people haven't actually seen the handheld scanner, haven't done it, haven't worked with it, don't know how it works.
Right.
That could be a production problem.
Yeah.
And, when you're in a 24/7, 365 operation, that you can't do that.
Right.
There's no way you're stopping product from going out the door.
Right.
Because you're, So you got to shift and pivot. And I think being honest, some people get embedded in the success of something, and it becomes part of them, like they own it, and that's good. But then they push it to the point where it's going to break if you don't slow down or take an inventory. And
yes.
A lot of times that doesn't happen. And then what ends up happening is, things begin to compound. The complexity begins to get worse because we're not just accepting the reality, right?
Yeah. I'm here with Chris Clark. We're talking about ERP success, AI success, a lot of different stuff related to digital transformation. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm Greg Benton. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Third Stage Consulting. And if you are embarking on your digital transformation journey or in the middle of that journey in 2026, you're going to want to see our digital transformation report. This latest edition really dives into a lot of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace and the ecosystem right now. It also highlights a number of the things that are happening with AI being an important component and integral part of the ERP systems that are leading the way right now. Also, the shift toward composable and best-of-breed cloud solutions is really accelerating the decline of monolithic ERP replacement. The opportunity to download the report is found at thirdstage-consulting.com. And you'll also find other tools that will help you in the initiatives and the business planning that you're doing for 2026. Don't leave phase zero without it. Reach out today.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or a free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 281. My name is Eric Kimberling, CEO of Third Stage Consulting. This is a tech-agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. Excited to have you here today. And we're here chatting with Chris Clark, a fractional CIO, very experienced CIO. We're talking about ERP and AI success and what it takes to succeed in your digital transformation initiatives. That's a great point. I mean, I think the project managers in all of us would say, don't delay that project a month. But the really good project managers, the ones that are good, can say, well, we might have to delay this a month, and that kind of sucks. But what would suck even worse is if our guys out on the shop floor couldn't use the scanners or couldn't complete transactions, couldn't ship product. That would be really catastrophic. So let's not do that.
That's a much higher risk. So you go. So the proactive, glass half full approach is, what can we do? What can we get done in this time frame?
Yeah.
And then let's push the things that are higher risk out a little bit further. And I think, a lot of people end up going in that manner, but don't recognize it. In other words, sometimes the RAG chart is subjective, not evidence-based, right? So someone will say, this is green, and it's not really green. And so you need a formula for that, and that's what, so that's one of the things we did on the project. We said, we're not going to just put a subjective RAG. We have an actual formula in spreadsheet that determines the RAG. So it's evidence-based. Right. And, you can agree with it or not, but it's data-based. It's backed by the data. You can say, okay, it's amber. I love amber, by the way, because it's so obtuse. Like our CFO would go, listen to me. I don't do amber. I do red and green.
Right, red, yellow, green. How hard can it
be? Right. There's no amber. So amber is red. I'd be like, okay, but it's light red. It's not really like a full dark red.
Right.
It's sort of.
So it's yellow. It's what I would say.
Right,
it's yellow, right? No.
Right. So I guess you could have a RAG chart that has the whole rainbow spectrum, but how useful would that be?
So I want to stop here for a second because it contradicts what most project managers think and what most project managers are trained to believe. And that is, sometimes the smartest thing you can do is deliberately delay your go live. And that's really important because I don't know, I cannot recall honestly, the last time that a client on their own said, hey, have we thought about what would happen if we did go live, or we continued to accept these risks and still went live? Usually it's us saying that. It's oftentimes, unfortunately, at third stage, we're the bearers of bad news, because again, we're not here to sugarcoat things. We're not here to make vendors look good or bad, for that matter. We're not here to make them look bad either. But a lot of times vendors and system integrators are so focused on CYA. Let's make ourselves look good. Let's grade our own homework and give ourselves an A- just to make it seem like we're being objective. But really, we could be failing the test, but we're still giving ourselves an A-, B+, just to sound objective. But sometimes you have to look at that. You have to look at not personal. I'm not trying to make this personal and blame vendors or system integrators or even the end client. But sometimes you do have to deliberately delay or go live. At the very least, you have to look at, well, okay, what if we spent an extra X amount of time and money on this go live? What risk are we mitigating on the other side? Or can we accept that risk? And again, it's the key here is don't let the vendor define that risk for you, because it is dangerous once they start telling you, oh, this is just normal. It's a normal hiccup, or, oh, it's just normal resistance to change. People will figure it out after go live. That's even worse when they start talking about, well, we'll deal with that after go live. We'll deal with that in phase 2. Once you start hearing that, you should throw up the red flag right away, because that's the risk. That's the failure point. That's the real cost that isn't quantified in your weekly status reports that might say you're on budget or pretty close to budget. So sometimes the smartest thing you can do is deliberately delay or go live. And I'm not advocating for lackadaisical project management, go live whenever, just if it happens, it happens. It is what it is. None of that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is be smart. Know that things change. Know that you learn along the way. Know that there are risks percolating under the surface. And also know that you're never going to get rid of all the risk. You're going to have risk no matter how long you wait. So, there is a point of diminishing returns. But there's also recklessness. And that's where a lot of companies get stuck, is they get reckless. They jump into these implementations and these go lives without realizing that, oh, shoot, now I can't ship product. And that $100,000, that $200,000 I saved by going live on time and not delaying the project, now I've lost millions, tens of millions of dollars and lost revenue. And that's the way to think about it. And by the way, that's what people get fired over. They usually don't get fired over a delayed go live or a, going slightly over budget. I'm not saying you should aspire to that, but if you're going to get fired, it's probably going to be for derailing the operations of your business, not for a project that took more time or money than you expected, within reason, of course. So sometimes you do need to delay the go live. And Chris described a 3.5-year Oracle Fusion ERP implementation that won an award and only had a 1-month delay. But the key here is that the delay wasn't a failure that happened to him. So he did have a delay. He didn't go on time. And it's pretty impressive. If you look at a 42 month estimated time frame, he went 1 month over. That's actually really good. I would consider that, for all intents and purposes, on time. A month is a month, but it's not nearly as bad as most delays. But even then, it didn't happen to him. It didn't happen to his team. It was a decision they made on purpose. It was deliberate. And they looked at the reality and said, these modules aren't ready. Or the modules are ready, but the people aren't ready. And so 5 people on the planet never touched the handheld scanner in testing. A change champion missed the last 4 meetings. And then in a 24/7 operation, going live with those people who've never used the system isn't a risk. It's a guaranteed production problem. And they knew it. They knew that they couldn't just gloss over that, oh, it's just a few people. It's just a handful of people. They'll figure it out. And I have to, and one thing I would like to know is whether or not maybe a vendor, I imagine someone in the room had to have told Chris, hey, don't worry about it. It's just a handful of people. Everyone else got, 90% or more of the people got the training they needed. But he had to look at that and say, yeah, I get it, but that's a big enough risk that I need to make sure I'm right. And guess what? I imagine the time and money he spent in that 1 month, call it overrun, was probably a lot less, way less, exponentially less than it would have been if he would have let it go and dealt with it and go live. So they made the hard call. They delayed it. They did a stage go live, and they saved the budget and they saved the project overall. And this is what Chris calls failing well. And I think that's a really interesting takeaway from this conversation so far, is that it's not black and white. It's not just either or, success or failure. You are going to have failures and risks along the way. It's just a matter of how big are they? How are you mitigating them? And where you can, how can you avoid them? There are certain risks you can avoid, or at the very least, get ahead of them before they become even bigger risks. So it's about how you fail. You want a manageable, contained, deliberate pause. And in that case, that's not a failure. It's more leadership. It's strong leadership. It's risk-adjusted leadership. It's focused on outcomes. Again, back to Chris's point. So The trap here to avoid is the subjective green status. Your vendor, your system integrator, your big four consultancy telling you the project is green when really it's not. It never was, never is going to be, but they're telling you it's green, and they give you this false sense of confidence. And what's interesting about what Chris was saying is he built an evidence-based formula for status reports. The data determines the color, not the optimism or the feelings or the subjectivity of the person presenting the status report. So the two takeaways here, if I have two to leave you with, just building on what Chris said, is one, build your status reporting on evidence, not vibes. And two, have the backbone to say, we're not ready, even when you're the only person in the room saying it, because a quarter later, everyone usually realizes you were right.
And I think recognizing when you need to step back is the most important, is one of the most important things. And just being real about it, and you may be the one guy in the room saying, well, I don't think we're ready. And everyone else is going, no, push. And that's okay. You'll push, and then what will happen, a quarter later is they'll go, oh God, we should have listened to the guy who was saying we weren't ready, right? And that's a learning experience, right? Something to recognize and glass half full again.
Yeah. Well, good stuff. Well, now I want to get
okay to fail well.
Yeah, exactly. Is like, contain it, know what's happening. I mean, that's the key thing. A lot of times companies are failing. They don't even realize it. And again, depending on your partner
we're always failing, right?
Yeah.
But we're also succeeding at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
We're succeeding and failing. Right? I don't know.
Yeah. What are you doing on the failures? I mean, that's the key. How do you react to it? What do you do about it? It's not how do you avoid it? It's what do you do once you do fail. So here's a question, a good segue into another thread I want to make sure we get to here today, because I know you've got a lot of good opinions on this. I'd consider you more on the cutting edge of AI adoption. You've been talking about it, using it for a while, and I've watched you be an early adopter. But this question, whoops, I hid the question before we could even read it. So on YouTube, Alex asked the question here: where do you think AI, especially in manufacturing, will add real value to the end customer? As of today, many of the agents are very horizontal and don't go deep into the manufacturing trenches. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. So, and I think, candidly, the companies that are going to benefit most from AI in manufacturing are the ones that are not gigantic, because the ones that are gigantic have a much larger model to build than the ones that are smaller. So the smaller ones are going to be more agile and build models that work faster. But back to the question. So I think there are two areas of manufacturing which AI accelerates value really quickly, and it's supply, demand, and production planning, right? Because you can build a model that takes into account every variable, like a line's down, it needs to be maintained. This line can only run this product in this time frame. The weather affected us, an ordering or a raw material affected us. And then you can rebuild the plan to optimize for delivery, OEE, OTIF, customer priority, whatever it is. And all that calculus is done instantly by AI. A lot of people think that what's going to happen is we're going to build these agents, and then the people that are managing the process are going to become whack-a-mole. They're going to say, yes, do this, do that. And they're just going to become, the receiver of the robotic. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is, now that we have the ability to take intelligence and stick it in an app and have it assist in a decision, right? It's not just if then else, less than else. It's now, consider everything that came before, right? And learn, and then help us make a better plan, or make a better decision. It's going to accelerate decisions. And so what I think is going to happen in the short term is not we're just going to become whack-a-mole bots, which what people think is going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think what's going to happen is the folks that learn to use this tool are going to become much better decision makers, and get the ability to absorb the knowledge faster. And that's how I think it's going to help manufacturing. It's going to help improve margins, efficiency, quality, all of these things that matter to a company that's producing, that has a demand that's greater than their supply. It's also going to help in selling as well, because I think one thing AI does really well is it says these are the things you're doing well, these are the things you're not doing well, right? And so you end up going, well, how does that inform our strategy, right? Our organizational strategy. If I can now produce this much product faster in this market, what does that mean for where we should build the next plant, right? And so in manufacturing, and I love manufacturing because it's about building things, Eric.
Yeah,
I love building
and you're a builder.
And so if I could build a product better, faster, understand it better, faster, that's where we're going to apply AI immediately. And we're not going to do it in a vacuum. We're going to do it in an agile, measured way that informs us and the AI. So people end up becoming people who manage not only other people, but they manage the robotic nature of the application as well, as if it's an entity that's making decisions. But they're the ones making the decisions. We talked about this thing called human on the loop, human in the loop, and human on the loop, human of the loop, whatever you want to call it. I think human in the loop presumes the whack-a-mole.
Right.
Okay, human, time for you to whack the mole.
Yeah. Go attack the
whereas human of the loop or human on the loop is no, I'm governing this like I would any functional area of the business, and I'm the one, arbitrating and making decisions, but I'm also informing the decision, right? And informing the strategy. So that's what I think is going to happen in the short term. And how long is that going to take? A long time, because, if you adopted an ERP, a modern ERP in the last 3 years, you're in a very good position to optimize now. If you haven't adopted an ERP and you're still running on old tech, then your journey is much more difficult, because you not only need to figure out where AI is going to be most impactful, but you also need to completely re-engineer your business processes, with AI overlaid on top of it. And that's honestly two giant endeavors at the same time, right? Whereas if you implemented a modern ERP, you're going to have much better tools and approaches to lay on top of that foundation than if you haven't done it.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's not easy. That's why, these frontier LMs are hiring, spending $300 million on consultants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's such a new technology. The impact, both the good and the negative impact, is not yet known fully, at least long term. And that leads to another question, which actually just read this article the other day in the Wall Street Journal. It was talking about how leaders of AI software companies have shifted their tone from talking about how AI has the ability to replace jobs en masse and increase profitability and all this stuff. Now they're shifting their tone, and I find it super interesting and fascinating, because I think it's an admission that if we don't get people on board with the technology, they're probably not going to want to adapt or be part of the solution. So maybe we should stop talking about how AI is going to eliminate all the jobs before in order to get people excited about it.
The sad truth right now is, if you send someone loose with AI, they're going to end up spending 3x their salary relatively quickly. So the economy for it to set everyone loose and give them the bulldozer is just not there yet. So that's why you have and one thing that's popped up in the last couple months is these LLM routers, right? Where you go, okay, I can stick 2 Mac Minis in a closet over here, and for the minor compute, I can send it to them, instead of sending it to a Frontier LM where I'm paying a premium for that, So I think corporate America is everybody's going to find a way to get around this giant expense of using this amazing tool, right? Because right now the economy is not there. So we have to shift the pivot and figure out, we want this, but geez, I'm not going to pay Joe $100K and then spend $300K on his AI bill every year, right? This is not going to work, right? And then the consultants come in, and what do they do, Eric? Right? They're using your AI. Right. So not only do you have to pay them all this money, but you have to also pay for them. They're in your sandbox using your AI, right? So they're 3x what they normally cost. That model is just not going to work, right? It's just not going to work. So, and I think some people have found that out the hard way. And I think, back to the frontier LLMs, they're going public. So they don't want to say, oh, fire all these people and the AI will replace them anymore, because that's not politically correct anymore, right? They want to have their IPO, in SpaceX. Oh my God, look at that. So that's I don't think replace is the right word. I think retool, because you're getting these folks who can do way more functional roles than they did before. So it's not like they're doing job X. Like if you're a full stack engineer, good luck with that. Because you need to be a business problem solver. That's what you need to be, right? And so I don't know. One of the heads of AI said, "Oh, everyone should be a plumber or something." I'm like, no, everyone shouldn't be a plumber. No, that's not what they should do.
Because everyone else
your job is dead. You're white collar. You're dead. No, that's not. I don't think that's correct. I think if you're white collar, you should be thinking and using and learning this, because it makes you superhuman. It gives you the bulldozer. So, but you have to tactically know where to use the bulldozer too.
So I want to come back to this quick myth bust, and that myth bust is AI is going to replace your people. And back to the opening segment of this podcast, I talked about how this is the narrative that's dominated the last 2 years of this whole AI movement we're in the midst of. You fire the workers, you deploy the AI, watch the profits roll in. And that entire premise is flawed for two reasons. And just look at Ford. Ford Motor, the big U.S. auto manufacturer, recently had to hire back 350, I believe it was, 350 engineers that they had laid off due to AI. They had to bring them back to fix all the problems that AI had created. And by the way, that same AI tools will replace them. So interesting boomerang effect, I guess you could say. They lay people off, put AI in their place, and then have those same people come back to fix the AI. But that's one interesting case study and use case of why this doesn't work. But there's two reasons why in particular that firing the workers and deploying the AI doesn't work. And the one is that the economics don't work. Chris nailed it. You turn an employee loose with unlimited frontier AI, and you can burn 3 times their salary in compute costs. When that person starts using all this AI, the consumption costs are going to go up. And by the way, those costs are only going to go up in the future. Right now, we're probably seeing the lowest prices that we're going to see with AI. I imagine as people see more value, as the consumption increases and continues to increase, and as these big AI technology companies spend just massive amounts of money on these big data centers, they're going to have to at some point recoup those costs. And investors aren't going to allow them to continue running at losses. And by the way, there'll be a shakeout too. So you're not going to have as much competition longer term. I imagine you're going to see some big failures of AI technology companies that just can't recoup their costs. They'll go bankrupt. It's just not, they can't find a way to turn a profit or whatever. So you're going to have a shakeout, which means less competition, which usually means more cost. So I think everything I look at points to higher costs, not lower costs. And then you add to the fact that there's higher demand for building these big data centers, which is driving up component costs, labor costs, everything related to building data centers. So the economics aren't working yet. I don't think they're going to work any better in the future. So replace the human math falls apart the minute you look at the actual cost and the actual bill of AI. And that's why we're seeing LLM routers, local models, and all kinds of workarounds, because companies are trying to figure out how to make the economics survivable, and it's changing very quickly. Now, the second reason why AI isn't likely to replace your people is because replacement is the wrong goal anyway. The real opportunity isn't about replacing people. It's about retooling them. The spreadsheet person who moves data all around the day, you don't want to fire them. You want to teach them AI and do 5 or 10 times the work. And by the way, do it in a way that other people can benefit from too. And they become the person who governs that process going forward. You also look at someone like a full stack engineer. They don't disappear. They become a business problem solver wearing 5 hats. And Chris said something I love. Only a small percentage of the world actually uses AI. I think he said 5 or 10%. But 100% of the world is already subjected to it and will be affected by it. So that's super interesting. So you can't hide from it even if you want to. The winners aren't the people who avoid AI, and they're not the executives who use it to gut their workforce. The winners are the people and the companies who use AI to make their existing people superhuman. So the key here, the key takeaway I leave you with is don't replace. You want to retool. It's better for your people, better for your culture. And right now, it's the only version of the math that actually works. And again, you go look at Ford and the amount of time and money they lost on their AI initiative by trying to take that shortcut of reducing labor. You even look at Starbucks too. Starbucks, the big coffee retailer, had a similar problem where they assumed that AI would free up their employee time to spend more time with customers. Turns out that wasn't the case. They spent more time managing AI because AI was screwing everything up on the inventory side. So they ended up actually detracting from what their intent was, which was to help customers and just provide better customer service. Now, all of a sudden, your employees spend more time fixing the problems of AI and doing the low value type stuff. So it's actually a negative business value, a negative ROI. So you don't want to replace, you want to retool. It's better for your people. It's better for your culture. And the economics are going to work a lot better in that model. There's a lot, if you think about the roles that in white collar America, let's just say white collar office environments where you figure if there is going to be an area that's ripe for automation or replacement using AI, it would probably be a white collar worker. But you think about even and I hate to say low value because everyone has value to add, but from the technology side of things, it's easy to be dismissive of that guy or gal that's running a spreadsheet or an Excel data.
Spreadsheet guy. Is spreadsheet guy?
Yes,
So
exactly.
spreadsheet. I love spreadsheet guy, by the way. So I would say if you're a person who's just moving data from one place to another and generating a report, and that's like your whole ecosystem, learn AI really fast.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be able to do 10x what or 5x what you're doing, right? And that makes you more valuable, right? In the long term. But those jobs, I think those jobs, once there's an engine built to, there's two things. One, first you got to be able to trust the data, right? So you have to build all that infrastructure to trust the data. Then once you trust the data, moving the data around is a great application of AI. And so that role, that the person that's moving the data around and presenting it is normally doing it and massaging it in a way because it's not exactly correct coming out of the system of record, right?
Right.
It has to be manipulated, changed, massaged, presented. And that's a very important role in companies, right? But eventually, it's going to be something that's embedded in the system. And you want to be the person that is governing that, right? And
exactly.
Understands it. And that's important. And so, teaching people these tools is, tantamount to saving those roles.
Yeah, exactly. And adding more value. I think that's the people that are at risk are the ones that refuse to use AI. I think even if you have what could be perceived as a lower value job in a company or ripe for automation, you throw AI on it, and all of a sudden you're super valuable because you have the information and the tools to be able to analyze and make deeper meaning.
You say that. A friend of mine said the other day, I'm trying to reduce my exposure to AI. I said, good luck with that. Because, somebody had the stat that said, only like 5% of the world uses AI or knows about AI, or 10% of the world or something.
Really?
But the truth is 100% of the world is subjected to it. Right? Almost. Unless you live like in a hill in a cave somewhere.
Right.
But
no connectivity.
But everyone is going to have to deal with it in some way. So it makes sense to have a plan, right? It's like there's oxygen. You have to breathe it somehow.
Right.
Make use of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. So in closing, then, if you were to wrap this all up, and I appreciate you taking the time and sharing. I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of what we could have gotten into here, but it's really good stuff. What would you leave for CIOs, project leaders, project team members that are going through some sort of ERP, AI, or other digital transformation initiative? What kind of parting words would you leave them with? Like if you had to leave them with just a couple things to remember and take away from this conversation.
I would say focus on the outcomes, be proactive, not reactive. A lot of ERP projects, we're reactive, we're not proactive. Pay attention to the things that really move the needle. And you have a business project. That's what you have. It's not even an AI project. It's not an ERP project. It's a business improvement project. That's the way. That's what I would recommend. Think about it in those terms, and think about how AI can not only help, be embedded in the system, but how it can help manage the process, manage the program management process, because there are so many ways to govern a project and get evidence-based, status. It's insane how easy it is to really know what's going on now, because everything gets recorded. I mean, those transcripts are golden, right?
Oh, yeah.
We did a plant walkthrough a few weeks ago, and I took pictures. We were recording as we were walking around, and I took pictures as we were walking around. Here's an artifact that someone's using. This guy's talking about, down this row, here's how we optimize the putaways. I took a picture of it. And then embed that in the analysis, right? Where the AI can actually see what we're talking about, right? It's insanely useful and valuable to saying, okay, well, how do we optimize that process now that we know these things, so we can push more product out the door faster, which is what we're trying to do. So that's my advice. Be proactive, focus on the outcomes, think of it as a business improvement project. It'll be easier to sell, it'll be easier to get done. And be honest when things aren't working well. But also the glass is half full.
Right, exactly. Yeah, be optimistic, which is the whole premise of how we got to this conversation today. Is let's be glass half full instead of glass half empty. So I appreciate you being on the show to share those insights. Now, people,
thank you for having me here.
Absolutely,
I'm so happy.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. It's really exciting to have you here, and people that don't know, I don't know if you mentioned this in the intro or not, but you're a fractional CFO. So not that
CIO.
I'm sorry, CIO. Yes.
Right. CIAO, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Program manager. I like to focus on the strategy and the outcomes. Well, let's just put it there. If I had a title, I would call it strategy and outcome guy. Because the titles don't matter to me anymore at my age. I don't care. I care more about having an impact. Like you, I know you do. That's why you do what you do. And I would just, big shout out to you. You guys are doing amazing work. I love what you do. And it's highly useful and valuable to everybody, especially people trying to make honest, impactful decisions. You're a giant help to that community of people, and I appreciate it.
Oh, good. Well, thank you.
I'm going to try to come to Colorado if I can. I have to clear it with CENTCOM first, but
come to Digital Transfer September 9th through 11th. That's a perfect time to come. You can come to the conference and meet other CIO types and technologists and all that good stuff.
The takeaways from that are immense, because people will tell you the truth. You walk around, have a drink, and you hear the truth, and that's more important than anything else. And
you realize you're not crazy. Like, oh, okay, so I'm not crazy.
Right.
Like, oh, it's not just me. Everyone else is experiencing the same problems and the same type of issues. Well, good. Well, be sure to connect with Chris on LinkedIn. He's always sharing good stuff there as well. Again, fractional CIO that good person to know in your network. So keep him in your network. If he's not already, you can follow him. We've tagged him here on LinkedIn. If you're watching on LinkedIn, go in this chat here. You'll see his name tagged. If you're not watching on LinkedIn, just pop over to my LinkedIn page, find this video, and you'll find him there. So thanks again for being here, Chris. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.